So, hello and good evening, all of you. So, let's start with this kind of a talk on seminar on the idea of how do we read big books. Now, this is going to be a brief discussion. I would like to share with you some ideas about how to go about books like Harrison's. Now, Harrison's तो इसमें बस example है. It's not that I want you to read only Harrison's. I would really want you to learn how to appreciate all the big books. There are so many of them. For example, there will be Nelson's in pediatrics, there will be Love and Bailey in surgery, and so on and so forth. As you go ahead in your careers, when you become residents in different fields, तभी भी there are always going to be options to read big books, and then unfortunately, some of you will get trapped into that idea that oh, big books are not for us. Let's go for the smaller ones, right? So there is, of course, like you have seen in the 3 week challenge, there's always going to be a lot of apprehension, a lot of kind of fear, or kind of anxiety against the idea of taking up something like this. But I'm going to tell you there are ways. If you follow those ways, some of these are what are my experiences. Some of these are very standard ways of reading any big text. And well, of course, you can always customize it and do it in your own way, right? So let's jump into this. Since this is going to happen as a YouTube live for you, those of you listening, and if you have any questions, please put them up in our WhatsApp group. After I finish this talk, I will be taking up questions from the WhatsApp group, right? So let's start at this point. And well, this is my topic. The topic is how do you read a big book? And when I say how do you read a big book, I'm talking about a big book like Harrison's. But again, that's not my only intentions. This is, of course, for students who are a part of our Quest mentorship program in the year 2025. So let's start with the first outline of what I'm going to say. I'm going to read out the outline over here. This is what I'm going to deal with. Why do you read a big book at all? When do you start? Where do you begin? The most important part, I think, the crux is time management, because really the big book ka problem is not the book itself. It is how do you finish that book in time. So how do you go for time management? There are going to be two techniques that I'll kind of get you to understand: the SQR3 technique method and the Pomodoro technique, which is kind of one of the good techniques that will help you. And of course, the revision part of it, and then a bonus tip at the end, right? So stay around for the bonus tip. I hope you'll stay around. So the first question that you need to address for anything important is why do it at all? Why should you bother reading a big book at all? Now, when you think of it, there are going to be so many options. I mean, you could always take up a notes. There are so many classes giving you videos and audios. There are, of course, these notes that you can get from your seniors. There are these books which can, give you the question bank, and then you can just go to that question bank. Then why do you go to a big book at all? Well, I think the obvious answer is to develop concepts. See, the big books like Harrison's have not been written for your exams, period. Many people will go to the book thinking कि अगर if I read Harrison's, I will do better in my PG entrance. Now, that is true. If you read Harrison's and read it sincerely, you will do better in your PG entrance or any other exam. But that is not the same as saying that the big book was written for this. As a consultant, I'll also go back and refer to the book. There are many other people who will refer to that same book for many various different reasons. These books are reference books. They are not necessarily textbooks in the sense that you can use them for your exams. That has kind of gone away from the time that you have passed your plus 2 or 12 standard. Since you have been in the professional course, you have realized that most of these books are humongous. They're really huge because they are meant to be reference books. But what is good about the reference book is they will give you all the details that you need to know to understand the concept as the world understands it. So if you really are looking at the long term game, then read the big book. So if some of you are like, oh, I really don't care about the long term, I want to clear this particular exam, I'm going to tell you don't go for the big books. They are not really the best for you. But if you're looking at a long term game, if you're thinking 5 years down, 10 years down, what I become matters to me, then look at the big books, because they are going to build the foundation on which you start understanding science. When you look at shortcut books, they'll tell you just the most important things. Not wrong, but well, the most important things are not building your concepts. They are not really telling you much about that disease, about how do you approach and what do you make sense of it. It feels like rote learning. कि भाई हमने चार पांच चीजें सीख ली. But when you go to a big book, it doesn't happen like that. You try to understand and kind of like you're thinking. You're forced to think when you're in a big book to really understand what is that author trying to say, how much more depth can you go, and it's really like going into an ocean. So building those concepts really requires those big books, while the small books will give you facts but have no concepts. The choice is yours. I am not the kind of learner who can really stay with a lot of facts. me as a person has been a person, I still am a person who understands concept better, but I really can't remember the facts after the point. So for long term concepts, for short term facts, for long term big books, for short term, you can make your own choice. Again, the other big thing is that these books are usually reference books, which means they have everything that needs to be known. Now, you don't need to remember everything that is known, but it's good to at least go through it once. And what it really does is gives you an opportunity to be a global learner. Harrison isn't a book that you read only in India. It's a book that you read across the globe. So it gives you opportunity to be updated with that knowledge which people across the globe are having. There can be other reasons to read the book, but these are the ones which I think are the primary reasons why you should ever consider reading a book. The next question can be, when do you begin and where do you begin? Two important questions. When do you begin? Where do you begin? Now, here is something which I'm going to say, which might not be very nice to hear if you are in final year. Well, if you are in final year MBBS and if you have yet not made up your mind, should I read Harrison's or not? Should I read an XYZ big book or not? I'm telling you, I think you are a little too late. Now, again, don't take my word for it. It's up to you. If you are someone who is a fast reader and is a good learner, you might still do it. But the odds are not in your favor. I'm not saying don't continue with the big book, but I'm saying don't start it first time when you are kind of 1 or 2 months into your final year. But that means the best time to start a big book is probably, or if you talk about Harrison's, is probably somewhere around second year, second half of second year, or at least in your 30. Because utana time to Harrison's ko padne ko lagta hai, right? So when do you start? I think third year and preferably in the second half of second year is a good time to start with Harrison's. Some of you could have started in second year. Most of you have an opportunity to start it in third year. And I think that will give you ample time to do all the things that I'm going to say again as we go ahead. And it will give you ample time to revise, which is very important with big books like Harrison. Where do you begin with? What do you read out of Harrison's or any big book? Now, this is a crucial matter, and my thoughts are very clear. Read what you see. Many students try to approach the big book thinking that yeah, ये big book जब पढ़ेंगे, so we will read it as if we are kind of we'll read the big book as if we are kind of trying to finish a chapter after another. That's really not how it's going to work. If you try to finish cardiology out of Harrison's, आप finish हो जाओगे और cardiology नहीं खत्म होने वाली. Similarly, if you try to finish any subject or any subset out of Harrison's, it's going to be very tough, at least to begin with. So start with whatever is relevant, which means, as I've said earlier and n number of times in our classes, go to the wards, see a patient, and once you see a patient, go back and read it. If you listen to something in Quest or any lecture, go back and read it. If you have heard any other tutorial or video somewhere, go back and read it. So it has to have a relevance. The starting point should be relevant to you. It should not be something which, you decide today I start with gastro and I finish gastro. No, I don't think that's a good way to start. That said, whenever you start with Harrison's, ensure that you are starting with an idea that it is going to take some time. So don't rush through the book and say, I'll read one chapter and decide whether I'm going to read this further or not. That's not how it will work. Because very likely the first chapter will have mixed feelings. You'll feel, oh wow, ये बहुत सही बताया इसने, but यार इतना time लग गया इसको खत्म होने के लिए. So whenever you start with what is relevant. But whenever you start, don't be in a hurry to judge the book or to judge yourself whether the book is for you or not. Give it some time. थोड़े टाइम में क्लियर हो जाएगा कि वो किताब आपके लिए है कि नहीं. So when do you start? I think start in third year. And where do you start? I would say start with whatever is relevant for you at that point of time. Right? Now that brings us to the most important question, that is about time management. How do you finish a book if you start? Right? हैरिसन जैसी किताब का सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम, लवन बेली की किताब का सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम इस खत्म ही नहीं हो पाती. सो हियर इज व्हाट आई फील आर द थिंग्स और द प्रिंसिपल्स व्हिच आई वुड से वर्क द बेस्ट व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट टाइम मैनेजमेंट. Right? So if you're going to talk about time management, so reading Harrison's requires you to have a very tight schedule, right? And when I say you need to have a very tight schedule, what I'm basically saying is you need to have a timeline in mind. So let's say that you are right now, I'm just kind of schematically drawing this. So let's say that you are right now in third year MBBS. Or you can substitute it for final year and just abbreviate the whole story. And in fourth year MBBS, of course, उसके बाद आने वाली है आपकी exam for which you are reading it, and then of course there are exams after this like the PG entrance etc. for which you plan to read it. Right? Now, When you start plan over such a long time, third year plan, मतलब 2 साल का planning कर रहे हो, you need to plan this way that in your third year and stretching up to maybe the initial part of fourth year, you have finished your first reading of Harrison's. Somewhere in your second year, before the mid of the second year, you have finished your second reading, and then you have got a time for a very fast, a very quick third reading as well. Before comes the time for between this and this revision. This should be the plan. Now, again, don't get kind of worried about it कि भाई इतना तो नहीं हो पाएगा. I'm telling you ऐसा हो पाएगा अगर आपका जो फर्स्ट रीडिंग था और जो आपका सेकेंड रीडिंग था उसमें आपने अच्छे से प्लान किया. If you make your first two readings quite well planned, then you can do this, right? So plan the first reading through the third year and maybe up to a part of final year. You could also, of course, try to abbreviate this. It's fantastic if you could finish the first reading somewhere here, but that's going to be difficult because you have other things to do. So final year आते आते अगर आपका पहले first second month of final year में first reading हो चुका है of Harrison's, then it's great. What I'm also definitely saying is that means I think there should be at least 3 readings of Harrison's that you should ensure. उससे कम हैरिसन पढ़ोगे तो भाई मतलब नहीं बनेगा. मतलब there is going to be very less chance that you are really going to get a lot out of the book. If you read it just once, it's not going to really work, right? Now, if you plan to do this, then you should have a schedule which looks like this. There should be a short-term reading plan and there should be a long-term reading. What do I mean by that? That means whenever you are going to read, you are supposed to have an idea that I will have some subjects which I read in the short term. These short term subjects could be something which are relevant for maybe your practicals. These are relevant for some exams that are coming right now. So, for example, you might want to read PSM this way, you might want to read Ophthal ENT this way, you might want to read some other subject, gynae or some ward ending, maybe some part of medicine also this way. This is a short term plan. In your entire day of whatever time that you get for reading, spend at least 60% of time for short term reading, right? But keep a long term plan. एंड ये जो लॉन्ग टर्म प्लान है ये एवरी डे या एवरी वीक का प्लान करो कि एवरी वीक 40% ऑफ माय टाइम गोज इन माय लॉन्ग टर्म रीडिंग, राइट? डोंट रीड इन स्पर्ट्स, रीड विद द प्लान, राइट? ये फर्स्ट रीडिंग तभी खत्म हो जाएगा अगर आपके पास 40% ऑफ योर टाइम इज डिवोटेड टू दिस लॉन्ग टर्म रीडिंग. This long-term reading में you could devote it for Harrison's, you can devote it for Love and Bailey, you could devote it for Nelson's, you could devote it for anything, right? But the long-term plan is something which you should be really having with you. कि भाई 40% of my time is devoted for this. Now, again, this is not a rigid rule. This can change. For example, कोई exam pass आ रही है तो this might tend to 100%, right? You might have times when you don't want to read the long term. There is some one week जिसमें exam आ रही है, उस week में of course आप उस subject का सब कुछ पढ़ो, इसको मत पढ़ो. But again, come back to this average ratio of 40 to 60 of short term versus long term. This is a very vital concept. No, many students don't have this plan at all. They don't have this idea that they are going to read 2 subjects simultaneously. They start reading one thing and they stay on that one track for a very long time. उससे बोर भी हो जाते हो और थोड़े टाइम बाद समझना भी बंद हो जाता है. So ensure that you are not just reading one track कि आप बस 3-4 महीना हैरिसन पढ़ने का सोच रहे हो, गलत प्लान है. या आप 3-4 महीने बाद हैरिसन पढ़ने का सोच रहे हो, वो भी गलत प्लान है. Start where you are right now. Divide your week or day. Now day is difficult because you might not have that much time, but you can always divide your week into this, that 60% of my time of so many hours I get in a week I will devote to short term plan, and so many hours I get in the week 40% I devote to long term. The second very important time management rule is going to be have a backup book. Right now, this might sound a little kind of pessimistic, but I think this is a very important learning point that कोई भी पूरे हैरिसन्स को पढ़ के आप फाइनल एग्जाम नहीं दे पाओ. ठीक है, वो आपका प्लान भी नहीं होना चाहिए. सी अंडरस्टैंड, हैरिसन्स हैज नॉट बीन मेड फॉर योर एग्जाम्स. It's not an exam book per se, right? So since it is not an exam book, you need to have another book which you can read simultaneously or when you need to. Harrison is the part of your long term story, right? But short term में कभी कभी आपको कुछ और चीजें लगेंगी. Now these short term options can be the apps. Maybe you have kind of seen some apps from which you're reading. For of course all of you, it can be Quest, that you are writing down notes from Quest and they are your short term plan कि आप short term में इसको पढ़ रहे हो. ठीक है. It could be other books like Davidson's book or Dr. Bulu's book or maybe API. So Davidson, yeah, Dr. Bulu's book or yeah, फिर API. So these are good books, right? There could be other books that you maybe have been followed in your college. You can feel free to use them, right? Keep all of them in your short-term plan and keep them as your backup plan. What do I mean by backup plan? That means whenever you have read out of Harrison's, right? Whenever you have read out of Harrison's, that is to develop your concept. But whenever you have read out of these, that is so that you develop an answer and you prepare for that particular exam. Right? वो भी जरूरी है कि आप ऐसा नहीं कर सकते कि मैं एग्जाम के लिए प्रिपेयर ही नहीं कर रहा हूँ. राइट. सो वो जो शॉर्ट टर्म प्लान में आ रहा है उसको आप एग्जाम प्रिपरेशन में डालो. फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर आपका क्वेस्ट का क्लास हो जाता है एंड यू डिसाइड टू रीड दैट, नाउ डोंट कीप इट इनटू दैट 40%. राइट. कीप दैट इनटू दैट शॉर्ट टर्म कि अरे अभी अभी मैंने सुन लिया था, मुझे ये पढ़ना था, मैंने वो पढ़ लिया, आई फिनिश इट ऑफ इन दैट 60% प्लान. But for long term, I'm reading maybe the same topics or some other topics or maybe something else that I've planned, and that continues in my long term, right? The backup and the long term, if they continue simultaneously, towards the end, you will not be left with saying, "अरे मेरे से हैरिसन शुरू तो किया था, खत्म नहीं हुआ, चलो अभी नया कुछ शुरू करते हैं." नहीं, you already had something which was going on. Again, for a lot of you, it can be quest notes that you are writing. They have been written. I mean, they are coming from various sources that are coming to you, so you are writing them down. That will of course help, but it could also be another book. You could also do this, that you can simultaneously, in your long term plan, let's say you're reading pulmonary medicine and आप short term में डेविडसन उठा के उसमें से बीच बीच में रेफर कर रहे हो कि इसमें क्या दिया हुआ. Is that easier for me? So again, have two books. Some of you might feel भाई इतना तो मेरे पास टाइम ही नहीं है, and I'm telling you इतना टाइम तो आराम से आपके पास है अगर आप प्लान करके चलो. हाँ, अगर आपके पास ये प्लान ही नहीं है तो प्रॉब्लम. So have two books, have two plans, one long term, one short term. Have two books. One is Harrison's and another is either your Quest Notes or Davidson or something else. Don't rely, don't rely only on one source for reading, right? So don't have only one source that you read. The third thing within your time management is going to be a very important rule, that the first reading of Harrison. Let's say that you're reading a particular chapter out of Harrison's, and the first reading that happens out of that, the first reading has to be like a newspaper. I repeat this again. The first reading of Harrison's, whenever you read a particular chapter, read it like a newspaper. Now, इसका मतलब क्या है? See, many students, when they try to read Harrison's for the first time, they want to make sense of every line written in Harrison. That's not easy. In fact, I should say that's not even possible. To make sense of every ride in Harrison's, you need to be a very knowledgeable person and a very experienced person. The book was not written for undergraduate medicines, right? Undergraduate students of medicine. So आपको वो समझने के लिए ना ये बहुत broad stroke knowledge लेके जब आप हैरिसन पढ़ने जाओगे तो मतलब बनाए. So when you are starting off, if you try to make sense of every line that Harrison is writing, it will be very tough. But that's the good news. You don't need to know every line that Harrison is writing. Your concepts will develop as you grow in the career, and every time you come back to the book, you will get new meaning out of the book. That is how these books are. That's why they are so beautiful. आप एक बार पढ़ोगे सब नहीं समझ आएगा, सेकंड टाइम आओगे और समझ आएगा, थर्ड टाइम आओगे और समझ आएगा. तो जब आप शुरुआत कर रहे हो तब आपका प्लान है टू गेट एन ओवरव्यू ऑफ दैट टॉपिक. यू वांट टू नो इस टॉपिक में हो क्या रहा है. That's exactly how you read a newspaper. You don't really read a newspaper to say exactly इतने बजे यहाँ पे किसने क्या कहा था और उसने क्या कहा था और इसने क्या कहा था, उसके references करो, mark करो. You don't do that with your newspaper, right? I mean, of course, now the era of newspaper are gone. But if you read an article on internet about something, or you see a reel somewhere, or you see something on Instagram, you don't really slow it down and mug it up, do you? You don't. But you still remember it, don't you? You do remember it. If you read a newspaper, you don't really forget a newspaper. If you read an article just while traveling, in your car or in the train, if you read something, you don't forget that. Similarly, if you just read Harrison's for the first time, no strings attached, just read it because you need to finish that part as a newspaper. Well, you might not remember everything, but I can promise you're not going to forget everything. You're going to remember something, right? And what it will give you is an overview. So I repeat, the first time that you read Harrison's, the first reading should not be a very detailed reading. This is against what most students try to do. Most students try to make the first reading so detailed that they want to understand everything about it. I don't think that's necessary. I would say the first reading should be fast. It should be like a newspaper. And the first reading target should be that you need an overview of the subject. वो टॉपिक में क्या लिखा हुआ है, उस टॉपिक में क्या हो रहा है, आपको ओवरव्यू समझना है, बर्ड्स आई व्यू चाहिए आपको। दूर से आप देखना चाहते हो, अच्छा सीओपीडी में हो क्या था, होता क्या है, एस्मा में होता क्या है, हार्ट फेलियर में होता क्या है, स्ट्रोक में होता क्या है, राइट। हर डिटेल को समझना जरूरी नहीं है, right? When you read the first time, you need a fast newspaper like overview of that subject. That's what you're trying to do. Now, if you try to do that, you will maintain speed. If you try to understand every line, you are of course going to have a tough time, right? So try to remember that the first reading is going to be that way, right? Of course, when you're doing this, that brings me to my fourth point. If you start with, let's say, COPD, let's say आपने अभी शुरू किया कि हम COPD पढ़ने वाले हैं. It is a big chapter in Harris. If you decide to start COPD and finish COPD in one sitting, that's going to be very tough, right? Especially for the first reading. And many students get tired and then they leave it and never come back to it. Rather than that, since you have said already कि भाई 40% time devoted है Harrison's को, now I'm going to divide that 40% time further into smaller chunks. Remember, most of us cannot concentrate beyond 1.5 hours or so. In fact, I would say half an hour में भी हालत खराब हो जाती है, ठीक है? So don't plan reading chapter wise. Don't say I will start and finish COPD. No. Plan to read with time limits. So that's my next rule that I'm giving you for reading Harrison's. How do you manage your time? Well, you think time wise. You keep time limits to reading, not chapter limits. मतलब you are not planning for the first time कि I am going to finish the whole chapter. No, वो तो बाद में खत्म हो जाएगा, कोई बात नहीं, मुझे overview तो चाहिए. You don't do that with the newspaper, do you? You don't say कि आज मैं newspaper पूरा start to end पढ़ने वाला हूँ. If you take up a magazine, you don't finish it off. If you are listening to, I mean, any podcast also, you don't necessarily finish it off. You finish off depending on how much time you have. You decide the time. You want to manage the time, you decide the time before you go in for the book. Before you sit with the book, you decide 45 minutes है मेरे पास. 45 minutes में मुझे जो पढ़ना है मैं पढ़ के आ जाऊँ. That will keep you alert on being fast over here. Otherwise, if you think मुझे चैप्टर खत्म करना है तो आप बहुत डेप्थ में जाना शुरू करोगे, फिर स्पीड गया. बट अगर आप सोचोगे नहीं, मुझे 45 मिनट्स में जितना पढ़ सकता हूँ सीओपीडी पढ़ लेना है, मेरे पास इतना ही टाइम है इस चैप्टर को पढ़ने के लिए, तब आप स्पीड में रहोगे. I repeat again, you don't need to understand everything. The reason why people will not be able to do this is because of that inherent urge कि पहले हमें सब कुछ समझता था जब हम 12th स्टैंडर्ड में थे, हर किताब हमें समझ आती थी, अब समझ नहीं आती. भाई ठीक है, किताबें बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स है, ये किताबें आपको फर्स्ट गो में नहीं समझने के लिए लिखी गई है. दैट इज द ब्यूटी ऑफ इट. Go with the flow, read them, get an overview, get a bird's eye view of the disease of the chapter, not a nuanced view कि आपको सब कुछ समझ में आना चाहिए, right? That's my tip for how do you manage time. Now, if you are able to do this, then I can tell you there's going to be a lot of advantage, because if you are able to do this, then you will be able to finish that first reading, and finishing the first reading of what you need to read gives you a lot of confidence कि बॉस आगे भी हम कुछ अच्छा कर सकते हैं, right? So my first thing for you is please understand that you need to manage your time well. That brings me to how do you do this first reading? There is a method that is called SQR3 method, that is mnemonic basically. Those of you interested, you could write this down or just listen out. It's not such a difficult thing. The first thing you do when you're trying to do your first reading is you survey. Survey का मतलब क्या है? Survey का मतलब है look at what are the headings, right? Whenever you pick up Harrison's, before you start reading, let's say COPD का example लेते हैं, before you start reading that chapter of COPD, go through all the pages at once. देख लो कहीं 10 पेजेस है, 15 पेजेस है, 12 पेजेस है, जो भी पेजेस है, सारे पेजेस एक बार देख लो और सर्वे कर लो कि इस पेजेस में ब्रॉड स्ट्रोक्स में हेडिंग्स क्या है. What are the headings that you have over here, right? So when I say survey, I mean what are the headings? What all is there in that particular chapter, right? That's the first thing. Second thing that you need to focus on is what are the questions. मतलब जैसे मैंने कहा आपको क्या पढ़ना चाहिए, वो पढ़ो जो रेलेवेंट है. So focus on what are the questions that you have about this, right? What are your questions, that what do you want to know out of it? Now sometimes these questions might be something that someone has asked you. Maybe you came there because someone had asked you, भाई बताओ सीओपीडी में टाइप 1 या टाइप 2 रेस्पिरेटरी फेलियर होता है, आप वही ढूंढने के लिए आए थे, तो वो क्वेश्चन आपके पास बना बनाया था. Go to that part directly. Sometimes you have a question because you saw something in a patient or you saw a clinical feature and you want to search वो clinical feature के बारे में क्या है. Sometimes you have come because there is no other reason but you wanted to read COPD. ये first time आप COPD पढ़ रहे हो. अगर ऐसा है कि आप क्वेश्चन लेके नहीं आए हो, आप जनरली पढ़ने के लिए आए हो, तो देन योर क्वेश्चंस आर वेरी क्लियर. योर क्वेश्चंस आर, मैं मेडिसिन की बात कर रहा हूं, योर क्वेश्चंस आर व्हाट इज एपिडेमोलॉजी, what are the risk factors, what is the pathophysiology, what are the clinical features, what are the complications, what are the investigations, and what is the treatment. As simple as that. These are your 4 or 5 questions. मतलब आप यही सवाल तो पूछने के लिए आए थे किताब को कि tell me about epidemiology, tell me the risk factors, tell me the pathophysiology, tell me the clinical features, complications, investigations, treatment. Which means when you're reading, you already have these questions in your mind, right? These are the questions you are asking to the textbook. So I repeat, it could be a question that someone has asked you, so you have come to read the book. It's something that you have seen that you want to know, so you have come to the book. Or if you have just generically come to read the book because you want to finish off reading that particular section, then these are the questions in your mind. You have surveyed the book, you have seen उस किताब में उस particular chapter में क्या क्या लिखा है. Then in your mind you are trying to find out ये सवाल कहाँ लिखे गए हैं. Where has the textbook described epidemiology? Where has the textbook described clinical features? Where has the book written investigations? Where are they? And you will find इसके बीच में और भी extra है. Whatever is extra is excluded. Pay attention to this. Whatever is extra is excluded. मतलब you might find उसमें जो genetics बात कर रहा है, उसके बीच में वो कुछ तो और भी कहानियां सुना रहा है किताब. Maybe that is relevant to the world. I'm going to again read through it like the newspaper, but my focus is on these questions. I have these questions with me in my mind. हर बार यही होने वाले. आप सर्जरी करो तो भी यही सवाल है, आप पीडियाट्रिक्स पढ़ो तो भी यही सवाल है. यही सवालों के जवाब, क्लिनिकल किसी भी सब्जेक्ट को पढ़ो तो यही सवालों के जवाब मुझे चाहिए. कि I surveyed the book, then I had questions in my mind. The next, of course, is I start reading. I read that part. I've already said when you read it like a newspaper. You recite. Recite का मतलब है wherever you find something is important, you either say it again or you mark. I'll come to this recite story now in just a minute that you are going to recite. That means you're going to mark what you felt was important. You had an aha moment. Oh, सही बोला ये. अरे वाह, ये सही था. That's your recite moment. You are reading, you are screening, you are reading, and then you said, oh, let's recite this. And then, of course, at the end of it, you're going to review it all. I'm going to talk about the recite now. I'm going to change the slide and I'm going to talk about what do I mean by recite, right? So let's say you start reading Harrison's. मैं example ले रहा हूँ pleural effusion का. So let's say you started reading Harrison's and you found these headings कहीं पे epidemiology लिखा हुआ था और इस heading के अंदर ना एक बड़ा 4-5 paragraphs लिखे गए थे, right? Now here comes another rule which I would like you to remember. When you are reading Harrison's, when you're screening through that book like a newspaper also, one paragraph of Harrison's for you as an undergraduate is 1 point to remember. That's it. Simple. जब आप कोई भी हैरिसन का एक पैराग्राफ पढ़ते हो, आप उस पैराग्राफ में स्क्रीन करके ढूंढो इसमें सबसे रेलेवेंट पॉइंट क्या सुना मैंने, या इसमें सबसे रेलेवेंट पार्ट क्या मिला मुझे. ठीक है. I repeat, if you try to understand every line of Harrison, it's going to be very tough. So rather than doing that, one paragraph should have 1 point, which means if you are in the habit of marking the book, that is a recite for me, then you mark that 1 point. Of course, there could be some paragraphs where there are more relevant points, so you can go maximum up to 3 points. 3 relevant points in that paragraph, right? Nothing more than that. Make a strict rule. मैं एक paragraph में तीन से ज़्यादा rules, तीन से ज़्यादा points तो नहीं पढ़ूंगा. But by and far for me, one paragraph of Harrison's is equal to 1 point. If you can stick to this rule, you will become very fast, and you will also become very kind of choosy in what you are reading. You will not try to read everything and try to mug up everything. You know कि एक paragraph में मुझे एक point निकालना है इसमें से. When you start looking at that paragraph and saying इसमें एक point कौन सा है? Oh, ये point सही है. For example, Harrison's is maybe talking in some particular thing. Is in that one line he's telling you फिजियोलॉजी में ऐसा होता है, पैथोलॉजी में वैसा होता है, एंड देन ही कम्स टू दैट पॉइंट वेयर ही सेइंग देयरफॉर या समथिंग लाइक दिस, वेयर ही काइंड ऑफ एम्फसाइजिंग ऑन दिस कि देयरफॉर इन केसेस ऑफ सीओपीडी दिस हैपेंस, और इन केसेस ऑफ प्लूरल एफिजन दिस हैपेंस। वो पॉइंट है, वो कुछ तो एक्सप्लेन कर रहा था वहां, वो पॉइंट मेरे लिए जरूरी है। उसके आगे पीछे की कहानियां ठीक है, बट वो एक पॉइंट उस पैराग्राफ से मुझे सीखना है कि therefore this happens, so this does happen in plural effusion, or this does happen in COPD, or whatever topic that you are reading. Find out that one relevant point and mark only that one point. वेरी ऑफन वी फाइंड कि स्टूडेंट्स ने पूरा का पूरा हैरिसन मार्क कर दिया, सारे ही पैराग्राफ के सारे लाइंस मार्क हो चुके हैं। इररिलेवेंट है ना, आप कैसे उसको याद रखने वाले? एक पैराग्राफ एक लाइन, एंड जब आपका एक पैराग्राफ एक लाइन हो चुका है, उसके बाद जब आप आके देखोगे अपने किताब को, तो यू फाइंड ओ सही है, मेरे पूरे किताब में ये 4-5 पॉइंट्स ही आए, मतलब सीओपीडी के हर पैराग्राफ में से एक एक पॉइंट आया। तो आप ज्यादा से ज्यादा 15-20 पॉइंट्स निकाल रहे हो, उससे ज्यादा क्या निकालोगे? मतलब इन एनी गिवन सेक्शन उससे ज्यादा तो पॉइंट्स है नहीं आपके पास, पैराग्राफ्स ही नहीं इतने। सो यू स्टार्ट डिस्टिलिंग द बुक इनटू स्मॉल यूजेबल चंक्स। बट रिमेंबर व्हाट हैज हैपेंड इन योर बैकग्राउंड। बैकग्राउंड इज वो करने के लिए ना आपको एफर्ट करना पड़ा, आपको सब कुछ पढ़ना पड़ा, आपको छानना पड़ा। यू हैड टू एक्ट एज अ फिल्टर in your own way. When you started filtering off, what you were doing is triage. You were trying to understand कि भाई इसमें से जरूरी points कौन से हैं. Because you were doing that, you will realize not that time, but when you go to the ward, when you see the patients, and in future, when you start practicing and start seeing these patients, your thoughts are much more refined because you know how to filter information. You are not just taking in everything and trying to rote learn. You're filtering that information to reach the most important point out of this. Most important according to whom? To a book, to a question bank? No, according to you. आपको उसमें से सबसे रेलेवेंट क्या लगा? ऐसा हो सकता है कि आपको जो रेलेवेंट लगा वो शायद सबसे रेलेवेंट नहीं था, कुछ और ऐसा था जो किसी और को रेलेवेंट लग रहा है। आई एम टेलिंग यू द ब्यूटी ऑफ दिस बिग बुक्स इज इट डज नॉट मैटर। ऑनेस्टली एवरी लाइन इज रेलेवेंट, ऑनेस्टली एवरी लाइन मैटर्स, बट व्हाट मैटर्स टू यू एट योर स्टेज ऑफ करियर is what you should bother. When I read Harrison's at my stage of my career, I will probably pick up something else compared to what you are picking up. I'll probably pick up something and say, wow, yaar, ye point bahut sahi hai. But that depends on my background knowledge. Similarly, two of you reading Harrison's might pick up two different lines. Though chances come hai, but possible hai. And that's okay. That depends on what is your background knowledge of the subject. As I've said, big books, if you come with a lot of background knowledge, you will pick up a lot more information. If you come with lesser background knowledge, that's okay. At your stage of your development, you pick up one point. Now, if you and me read the same book, we might pick up different points, but that is irrelevant as long as you can pick up that one point which matters to you, right? This is all happening for the first reading. You're reading through it like a newspaper. You find one relevant point as you screen through, mark it, right? So what did you do? You surveyed the book. You surveyed that chapter. You said, अच्छा इस chapter में ये सब लिखा गया है. You looked at your questions that you had in your mind कि मुझे ढूंढना क्या था इसमें से, epidemiology, clinical features, blah blah blah. वो कहाँ लिखा गया है? So you started identifying the book is not one big ocean, but it has chunks or islands that you need to read. When you started reading that island, you read like a newspaper. But while you were doing that, you were reciting, which means you were trying to figure out what is the most relevant point here. And the moment you found that one relevant point in one paragraph, that's the rule you want to work on. One paragraph is equal to one rule or maximum three. But to begin with, at least one paragraph is one point. You're following that rule and you mark that only one point. And when the chapter is over, you come back to review, right? That might happen on the same day. You might just finish your 25 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes and come back and say, पिछले 40 minutes में मैंने ये पढ़ा, ये 5 points मुझे पता है. That's it. Or if you finish the chapter at the end of 2-3 days, you can come back and say, oh, chapter खत्म होने के बाद ये चीजें मैंने मार्क की है, ये मुझे पता है. This is what is relevant for me, right? That is how you do the first reading of Harrison, and that is the SQR3 method, where you are trying to identify the survey, question, read, recite and review. Right. Now, इसके बाद आएगा सेकेंड रीडिंग. कभी ना कभी आप सेकेंड रीडिंग शुरू करोगे. तो फर्स्ट रीडिंग में लेट्स से आपने ये सब पढ़ लिया और एक साल खत्म हो गया, आप सेकेंड ईयर में आओ. अब तक तो आप भूल चुके आपने क्या पढ़ा है, ठीक है. देयर इज अ फेयर चांस कि आप सेकेंड रीडिंग में आओगे तब तक आप भूल चुके हो, बट आप ना वो एक एक दो दो पॉइंट्स मार्क कर चुके हो. सेकेंड टाइम जब आप रीड करोगे, आपको ना सर्वे करने की बहुत जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी. क्वेश्चंस आपको पूछने पड़ेंगे, बट आप सर्वे में अपने ही रीडिंग जो पॉइंट्स थे वो देख देख पाओगे कि भाई मैंने ये सब मार्क किया हुआ है. अब आप उसको और रिफाइन करने की कोशिश करो. सेकेंड रीडिंग में यू माइट फाइंड दैट, oh, I marked that one point as important, but now I think there is something else also that is important. You could always add, right? I would always recommend this, that when you do the first reading, so I'm just going to write this so that the thoughts are clear. That when you read the first reading, when you do the first reading, so first reading of Harrison, you do this SQR3 technique, and you are only going to mark your book. Don't try to do much more because speed nahi pakad pao. By the time you come for the second reading of that particular chapter, now the second reading doesn't need to be कि भाई एक साल बाद ही करना है. आपको उसी साल में किसी और वजह से वो चैप्टर पढ़ना पड़ा, आपको लगा कि मुझे पढ़ना है, go ahead and do it. There is nothing wrong in doing that, right? So even if you want to read that chapter again in that same year, that's absolutely fine. But whenever you do the second reading, this is the time that you start making notes. Again, something which I find many students absolutely miss out on. If you want to do a good kind of preparation using Harrison's, you should have your notes of Harrison. I don't think there is a way out of this, right? My personal thought is, अगर आप हैरिसन या कोई भी बड़ा किताब पढ़ना चाहते हो और उसको इफेक्टिवली बाद में रिवाइज भी करना चाहते हो, आपके पास नोट्स होने ही चाहिए, right? Now, what are these notes made up of? These notes of Harrison's that you write should have 2 to 3 sources, right? So I repeat, this note that you write should have 2 to 3 sources. What are these 2 to 3 sources? Well, some of you must have figured out by now. The first source, of course, is what we have marked in Harrison. So Harrison में जो कुछ आपने मार्क किया है, that is your first source. जो आप इस फर्स्ट रीडिंग में मार्क करते जा रहे थे, सेकेंड रीडिंग में भी आपने शायद कुछ मार्क कर लिया, वो आपका फर्स्ट सोर्स, वो आपका फर्स्ट पॉइंट. सेकेंड इज आपका जो शॉर्ट टर्म रीडिंग हो रहा था. In most of your cases, I would say it would be the quest notes, right? Add that into the notes, right? You could also reverse it, ना? By the मतलब ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि rather than you writing a separate note, आप quest के note को baseline पकड़ो, आप quest के note को एक anchor पकड़ो, और उसमें जो कुछ आपने हैरिसन से पढ़ा और आपको लगा यार क्वेस्ट के नोट में नहीं था, डॉक्टर शिंदे ने नहीं बताया, मुझे नहीं समझ आया, मुझे थॉट ही क्रॉस नहीं हुआ, बट हैरिसन मेंशन कर रहा है, मुझे सही लग रहा है, add it into your notes, right? I've already said this couple of times that I don't intend to teach you the whole textbook. I can't. I don't think anybody can. I'm teaching you what I feel is relevant for you and for me as a practitioner, for doctors in real world. I'm teaching you that. My plan is to get you ready for the real world. That's what the Quest mentorship program is for. But of course, there would be points which I probably did not think are important. That was my interpretation of the book or of the subject. Or maybe I thought it's important, but maybe I didn't put it across in the way that you got it, or you probably could just not find it relevant as to how I said it, right? For whatever reason, it's not in your notes. Add the Harrison's textbook over there, right? There can, of course, be a third source, and the third source can be either an app or it can be another textbook. It can be an app, like one of the apps that you're following, or it could be another textbook or something that you heard in the classes, maybe in your college lectures, या किसी ने कहीं और बता दिया था. Add all of that and make pit pat notes, right? ऐसे notes लिखो कि भाई आप आज से 3 साल बाद भी अपने notes पढ़ो ना, तो you should feel proud about it. Spend time in writing your notes, right? Spend time in writing your notes. But when you spend time in writing your notes, the very important thing to remember is your notes should be following. They should be crisp. Matlab, write in shorthand. You have seen me writing notes in Quest. I don't write the whole story. I draw a diagram. So your notes should be like that. They should be crisp. To be crisp, it is always good if they are made up of diagrams or if they are made up of flowcharts, right? Make flowcharts, make diagrams, and make your notes crisp. You don't need to write down the whole story. पूरा English की कहानी मतलब sentence to sentence is what, but सब लिखने की जरूरत नहीं. Write down the relevant words, the bullet points, or the flowcharts as you understand. That's one. Second, when you write notes, they should be agile. Agile का मतलब है there should be an ability to modify them. नोट्स लिखोगे तो उसके साथ जगह छोड़ो. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि आपने एक नोट लिख दिया और वो कंप्लीट हो गया, आगे पीछे कोई जगह ही नहीं. There will be more information that will come when you read, when you have the third reading. There will be more information that will come when you read that and you go to your wards and the professor there said something new, or you hear something else and there is no more information coming. Keep them agile. That means don't lock into that note. Don't say कि ये note complete है. Always believe that you have written a good note and there is more that can be added. Keep it agile, keep it open, keep it open-ended so that more things can come and you can modify that note to start resonating with what you understand. And the third thing, very important, is keep that note handy. What do I mean by handy? Keep that note in such a way कि आप उसको अगर वो किताब में लिख रहे हो तो एक छोटी सी किताब में लिखो ताकि उसे कैरी कर पाओ, या फिर still better if you're using iPad or some electronic device, write it on that. How do you keep it handy? That's up to you. Keep it handy so that you can have an easy access to it. आप अगर वार्ड में भी गए हो वो नोट आपके पास होनी चाहिए ना। देखो वार्ड में जब आप जाते हो तो आई हैव ऑलरेडी टोल्ड यू माय थॉट्स वेरी क्लियरली। ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए कि आप डिसाइड करके जाते हो आज मैं ये केस देख के आऊंगा, नहीं। आप जाते हो और आपको जो केस वहां सामने दिखे आप देख लेते हो, ठीक है। तो उस समय अगर आप वो चैप्टर पढ़ चुके थे, ऐसा हो सकता है वहां जाके आपको लगे यार मुझे याद नहीं आ रहा, यू कैन ऑलवेज गो थ्रू योर नोट्स एंड लाइक तीन चार चीजें मैंने लिखी है हैरिसन में से, तीन चार चीजें मैंने लिखी है, इतनी रिलेवेंट चीजें तो मुझे पता है, गो अहेड, दैट्स इट। बट उसके लिए वो आपकी नोट उस समय एक्सेसिबल होनी चाहिए। If your notes remain accessible with you everywhere, the moment you come up with a question, let's say I am talking about pleural effusion today, and maybe 5 days, 5 months later, you have written down a note of pleural effusion, and there is a class happening in your college about pleural effusion. You immediately have that, or you are listening to a video, or someone talks about pleural effusion, or the professor asks a question in your words, viva. You have that note with you, right? So keep your notes handy, keep them agile, keep them, kind of written in a manner that they are crisp, they are diagrams, and keep them handy. Keep adding to them. Add to that note, of course, in your third reading as well, right? So the first reading you were just marking. The second and the third reading is when you do the heavy lifting of adding them to your notes and you kind of update it with 2 or 3 sources. Now, some of you might think, यार ये हैरिसन को और sources की क्या जरूरत है? I mean, why is it that I need to add more sources to Harrison? Well, the answer is obvious. The answer is you were not reading Harrison's to make it for your exams. You were reading Harrison's to develop your concepts. And the filtering that you did at this point, that one paragraph is one point. This filtering is what was your learning process. इस filter के वजह से आप सीख गए कि information को कैसे dissect करना होता है, और वही आपको help कर रहा है। बट आपने निकाला तो एक ही पॉइंट है ना, और पॉइंट्स होंगे जो एग्जाम के लिए लगेंगे, वो पॉइंट्स आप क्वेस्ट के नोट से या किसी और टेक्स्ट बुक से ऐड कर रहे हो। what that is doing is it is helping you to follow this speed. Now some of you might have realized I did it here, some of you might not, that progressively your readings become faster, because पहले रीडिंग में आप वो SQR3 कर रहे थे, आपको बहुत टाइम लग रहा था सब कुछ खत्म करने। सेकेंड रीडिंग में भी आपको टाइम लगेगा बिकॉज आप नोट्स बनाओगे, बट अब आपके पास वो पहला पार्ट किया हुआ है, आपके पॉइंट्स मार्क किए हुए हैं, और आपको उसमें और एक्स्ट्रा पॉइंट्स बनाने। आप इस टाइम तक क्योंकि शॉर्ट टर्म रीडिंग भी कर रहे थे, आपके पास बाकी चीजें भी रेडी है, आपको समराइज करना है सेकेंड रीडिंग, एंड थर्ड रीडिंग में बस उसको थोड़ा सा ऐड ऑन करना है, राइट? इफ यू डू this will really kind of start slow but gradually pick up speed, and it will snowball into a very very actionable plan that will make your job much easier as you go ahead, right? So think about it. You can of course customize what I've just now said. It's not mandatory कि आप इसको इसी तरह से करें, but whatever way that it suits you, please think about ways in which you are going to make this happen, right? So I hope this is making sense to you. And now I'm going to move towards the last, not the last, the second last important part of how do you pick up speed. Now, when you have done the first reading with SQR3T3, SQR3 method, the next is a very important add-on method which helps, especially in the second reading and the third reading. And this one, pay attention, is called Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro is a time management technique. It was developed in 1980s and by this person gentleman, but the idea is a very very important kind of add-on to something that you can do. Pomodoro is something I use in my practice, not my clinical practice, but in my practice of doing other things when I'm learning new subjects, when I'm learning new books, when I'm reading. Most of you must have heard from me that I'm very often reading something or the other. But how is it that I'm reading so many things? Well, I am doing this, and a lot of you must be knowing that this exists, but you might not know the name or the technique. So here it is. I'm going to dissect out the technique for you. The first thing that you do in a Pomodoro technique, Pomodoro is that kind of a watch, the clock, right? So Pomodoro technique में first क्या करना है, आपको एक टास्क सिलेक्ट करना है। क्योंकि अभी हम हैरिसन की बात कर रहे हैं, ये आप किसी भी चीज के लिए यूज कर सकते हो, किसी भी टाइप के रीडिंग के लिए यूज कर सकते हो, पर क्योंकि हर हैरिसन कर रहे हैं तो मैं कह रहा हूँ पोमोडोरो टेक्निक यूजुअली सेकंड रीडिंग में लगाओ, फर्स्ट रीडिंग में थोड़ा थोड़ा ट्राई करना शुरू करो। सिलेक्टेड टास्क, नाउ इन दिस केस select the task of reading Harrison's, doing the second reading, that my intention is to do that SQR3 technique, right? Second, set a timer. बहुत जरूरी है, मैंने पहले भी कहा था, रीड अकॉर्डिंग टू टाइम, नॉट अकॉर्डिंग टू chapter limits, right? So set a timer, and for Pomodoro the timer has been classically studied, and that is 25 minutes. I would strongly recommend that you use this timer. 25 minutes का timer लगाओ in your watch, set a 25 minutes timer. This is your Pomodoro. Third, ensure that for this next 25 minutes there is no distraction. Mobile phone switched off, we are silent, away from you, nobody coming to distract you. आप लाइब्रेरी में बैठे हो या रूम में बैठे हो, घर पे हो या हॉस्टल पे हो, ये 25 minutes में work on the task that you have decided but have no distraction at all. Ensure कि इस 25 मिनट में आप full focus में, right? Now this will be very kind of difficult to begin with, बट एज यू प्रोग्रेस इन द टेक्निक यू रियलाइज ये 25 मिनट कब चले जाते हैं आपको समझ नहीं आता, बट इस 25 मिनट आप जितना काम करके निकलते हो वो बाकी सबसे बहुत ज्यादा है, राइट? व्हेन द टाइमर गोज ऑफ 25 मिनट जैसे होता है, स्टॉप, राइट? एब्सोल्युटली स्टॉप, व्हाटएवर हैपेंस डोंट रीड आफ्टर दैट 25 मिनट्स, एंड वेरी इंपॉर्टेंटली टेक अ ब्रेक. इस 25 मिनट्स के बाद 5 मिनट उस सीट से उठ जाओ, get away from that table, get away from that bed if you're sitting on it, get away from that library table if you're there, walk away after 25 minutes and get your mind absolutely clear from the task. Forget कि उस task में क्या किया, ठीक है? Don't think about that task, don't kind of try to recite, try to remember, नहीं. वो 25 minutes आपको मालूम है, आपको इतना फोकस करना है कि थक जाओ 25 मिनट्स के बाद और उठ के निकल जाओ. 5 मिनट का ब्रेक, ठीक है? उस 5 मिनट में जाओ, अगर कॉफी पीना है कॉफी पी जाओ, कहीं जाके गाना सुनना है गाना सुनो, वॉशरूम जाके आओ, डू वॉट एवर यू नीड टू डू. 5 minutes away from the table, and then you come back and you repeat this same for another 25 minutes. भले आप उसी चीज को आगे पढ़ना चाहते हो, 5 मिनट का ब्रेक ले, वापस पढ़ो, और ऐसे एट अ टाइम 3 पोमोडोरो करो. मतलब क्या हुआ, 1.5 आवर कंप्लीट हो गया. आपने 25 मिनट्स लिया, 5 मिनट्स ब्रेक, वापस 25 मिनट्स किया, 5 मिनट्स ब्रेक, वापस 25 किया, 5 मिनट्स ब्रेक. 1.5 आवर का आपका नेट टोटल टारगेट था, जो पोमोडोरो लगा के, टाइमर लगा के आपने ब्रेक किया इनटू 25 ब्रेक, 25 ब्रेक, 25 ब्रेक, राइट? You can also further subdivide this. You can say first 25 minutes I am going to do the survey and I am going to read the questions. Second 25 minutes I am going to write down my notes. Third 25 minutes I am going to write down, finish off writing my notes, and I am going to add on to those notes looking at other sources. Very, very decisive action is what makes Pomodoro really work, right? If your actions are not decisive, if you don't go with the planning, then you will say, ah, 25 minutes मैंने कुछ किया. But if you go with a plan, if you know what exactly you're looking for, whether it's a big book, whether it's some other task, Pomodoro really makes you way, way more efficient. Many students go with the book and say, "Aaj Harrison padhenge." Okay? Don't do that. Go with the book and say, next 25 minutes, this is what I'm going to get out of Harrison. I'm going to finish from here to here, whatever. Or if I'm going to read for 25 minutes and get a summary. Whatever it is that you need to do in the next 25 minutes, plan it very well. Pomodoro really works. I'm going to ask you all to try it out immediately, probably tomorrow or today night if you want to. Try one Pomodoro and see it works for you, right? It works, but you'll have to practice it. You'll have to customize it. For some of you, it might be 25 minutes. For some of you, might find, I can sit for 35 minutes also. Don't stretch too much. And remember, you have to complete 3 Pomodoros, so which means you should be in the state of mind of not getting fatigued. So don't stress too much. I'm actually happy if you use something like 15 minutes or 20 minutes Pomodoro rather than stretching beyond 25 minutes. But of course, each one of us is different. Use your own technique, whatever suits you. That gets me towards the last part of my story, that do not read Harrison's or any book for that matter without a plan to revise. It has to be a part of your plan, right? If you're reading Park for PSM, if you're reading, अब तो आपके वो साल चले गए जब आप Robbins पढ़ रहे थे, even if you're reading for PG entrances, right? Most people read as if there's no end to it. They read as if हाँ बस पढ़ते जाएंगे पढ़ते जाएंगे पढ़ते जाएंगे और डेटा लेते जाएंगे. See, if you are not having a plan to revise it, then you are honestly not going to make it. Okay? Because आप बहुत सारा जानोगे, but क्योंकि आपने revise नहीं किया, perform नहीं करोगे. So read to revise and revise to perform. That means when you are reading, in your planning for reading, there has to be a incorporation of, भाई आज मेरे पास 2 घंटे है, सीओपीडी पढ़ने के लिए। जब एग्जाम आ जाएगी तो नेक्स्ट डे पूरा मेडिसिन है। क्या मैं आज शाम को बैठ के 2 घंटे सीओपीडी पढ़ पाऊंगा? नहीं, तब मुझे सीओपीडी को मैक्सिमम 15 मिनट मिलने वाले, वो भी मिल गए तो सही। ठीक है, तो 15 मिनट में अगर मुझे सीओपीडी पढ़ना है एक दिन पहले, या अगर एक महीना पहले भी मैं पढ़ने बैठा हूं, तो मेरे पास आधा घंटा होगा उसको पढ़ने के लिए, उससे ज्यादा तो टाइम नहीं है। उसमें मैं कैसे पढूं? वो मैं तभी पढ़ सकता हूं अगर मैंने सही से मार्क किया था और उसमें से नोट्स निकाले थे। सो हियर इज द कैच, why did we write the notes? Why did I insist that you should have notes? Because notes are how you revise, right? This note is what becomes your saving savior when you want to revise, right? If you want to give your exams using Harrison's, that can only happen if you're not planning to open up Harrison's one day before the exam, right? I'm very proud to say, way back, I gave my exams of final MBBS reading Harrison's. I'm very proud of that fact. Till date, मतलब बहुत साल हो गए उसका, वो irrelevant रहा है मेरे लिए। मतलब उसके बाद मैंने काफी बार हैरिसन पढ़ लिया, उसके नए मतलब निकाल लिए। बट आज भी मुझे बहुत सही लगता है यार, फाइनल एमबीबीएस एग्जाम सुशांत ने हैरिसन पढ़ के दिया। बट आई एम टेलिंग यू, आई डिड नॉट रीड हैरिसन ऑन वन डे बिफोर द एग्जाम। I was reading my notes one day before the exam, which came from Harrison's, right? I read Harrison's 2 times, 3 times, and I distilled it down somewhere, and that somewhere is what I was reading, right? Of course, there were some sections which I did not get time to distill down, so I did open up Harrison's. It would be wrong to say कि मैंने बिल्कुल Harrison नहीं खोला था, but it wasn't possible कि मैं एक दिन पहले बैठ के, 4 दिन पहले बैठ के वो पढ़ूं, right? Also important thing, keep time for revision. When you are revising, whether that is for PG entrance or whether it is for your university exams or anything, keep time for it. Dedicated time, saying that if this is my exam and I have so much to finish before it, I start my revision at this point no matter what. Many students try to finish their first reading, second reading, khich ke third reading before the exam, right? Don't do that mistake. Revision is a different mindset. When you revise, you're not trying to understand the topic. I repeat, when you're revising, you're not trying to understand the topic. When you revise, you are trying to distill that topic into one chunk of information. कि जब मुझे वो रिट्रीव करनी पड़ी, वो पूरा चंक ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन मेरे पास आ जाए। ऐसा नहीं कि मुझे याद है कि प्लूरल इफ्यूजन के 10 कॉजेस क्या है, नहीं। ऐसा है कि मुझे प्लूरल इफ्यूजन बोलते ही याद आ जाता है जो मैंने सर्वे किया था, इसके 5 सबसेक्शंस क्या है, हर सबसेक्शन में क्या क्या था, एंड सो ऑन एंड सो फोर्थ। इसके लिए when you revise, or rather when you read, so that brings me to the last rule that I'm going to tell you, that if you understand this, what I'm saying, that you read all the 3 readings or whatever readings, so that you revise, and you revise so that you perform in the exam. Reading does not lead to performance. Now, reading should be for revision. तो इसलिए when you know कि भाई रिवाइज करके मुझे परफॉर्म करना है, here use what is called the rule of 3. रूल ऑफ 3 का मतलब है कि जो भी सेक्शन है, अगर मैंने एपिडेमियोलॉजी भी पढ़ लिया, मुझे उसमें से एटलीस्ट 3 चीजें याद होनी चाहिए। अगर मैंने क्लिनिकल फीचर्स पढ़ ली, मुझे उसमें से एटलीस्ट 3 चीजें याद होनी चाहिए। अगर मुझे इन्वेस्टिगेशंस लिखना है, मुझे एटलीस्ट 3 चीजें याद होनी चाहिए। अगर मुझे सारे सब हेडिंग्स याद है और हर सब हेडिंग में से एटलीस्ट 3 चीजें याद है, आई विल रॉक द एग्जाम, राइट? आई विल डेफिनेटली परफॉर्म। बट इफ आई ट्राई टू मग अप 10 causes of pleural effusion और 5वां कॉज तक मैं याद रखने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ, आई एम सैचुरेटिंग माय ब्रेन बॉस। इतना याद रहने की जरूरत भी नहीं, और इतना याद रख के करोगे क्या, राइट? सो इफ यू आर someone who wants to really improve your game, pay attention to the rule of 3. Rule of 3 is a very powerful rule because it helps you to kind of debulk your information load. आपको बहुत सारा याद रखने की जरूरत नहीं है, आप छोटे छोटे मॉन्स्टर्स ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन याद रखो। हर चीज के 3 3 3 3 4 4। बट रिमेंबर, ये 3 4 ना आपके रेलेवेंट में से आए। सो ऐसा नहीं कि आप 3 4 हैरिसन से याद रख रहे हो। आपने हैरिसन से एक दो पॉइंट्स निकाल लिए, आपके शॉर्ट टर्म रीडिंग, क्वेस्ट के नोट्स, आपके बाकी एप्स, बाकी सबसे आपने इंफॉर्मेशन निकाल ली, आपने उसको नोट्स में कंपाइल कर लिया, एक क्रिस्प और अजाइल नोट बनिया। जब आप रिवीजन शुरू करते हो, आप कहते हो बॉस ये सब सही है, ये सब मुझे समझ आ रहा है, बट इसमें से 3 चीजों मुझे नहीं बोलनी है, 1 2 3। अच्छा, क्लिनिकल फीचर्स 3 चीजें नहीं बोलनी है, 1 2 3। अच्छा, डायग्नोसिस के 3 डायग्नोसिस, इन्वेस्टिगेशन ऑफ चॉइस, सेकंड इन्वेस्टिगेशन, थर्ड इन्वेस्टिगेशन। Think like that. See how fast your information starts transforming into a performance, right? Most students go to Viva with a lot of information and a lot of fear. I'm telling you, go to the Viva with the rule of three. The rule of three simple. मुझे हर चीज की तीन चीजें पता है, आप मुझे कुछ भी पूछ लो, मैं तीन चीजें तो बता दूं। ठीक है, कहीं से मैं जोड़ के उस पूरे चीज में तीन चीजें बता सकता हूँ। ठीक है, और वो कैसे बता सकता हूँ? बिकॉज आई कीप माई इंफॉर्मेशन डिस्टिल एज अ ब्लॉक। आई हैव अ ब्लॉक इन माई माइंड कॉल्ड प्लूरल एफ्यूजन। प्लूरल एफ्यूजन पूछो, क्लिनिकल फीचर की तीन चीजें, इसकी तीन चीजें, उसकी तीन चीजें, इसकी तीन चीजें, बट थिंक लाइक दैट। I am distilling down. This is funneling process happening. I'm funneling down from a big book to a usable size of information, and I'm having my rules in place, and I'm knowing that much. आप उससे ज्यादा मुझे पूछो, शायद मुझे नहीं आए, and that is okay. End of the day, I'm a medical student. I'm just a final year student, and it's okay. End of the day, Sushant, I'm just a consultant. I'm not supposed to know everything. I know a lot, but that lot is not everything, right? And I'm happy that whatever a lot that I know is usable for my patients because I have my rules for three. Everything that I do when I'm seeing patients, I'm thinking top three, top three, top three, top three. That's still applicable even today when I work because that started long time back. So I'm giving you something which will help you perform better in your clinics, in your exams. Tomorrow, as consultants, as residents, you are at the top of your game because you're knowing the top three. ये top three आपने decide किए. So remember a powerful rule of three. Read by the S3Q3, SQR3 technique. Read by Pomodoro technique, and when you revise by the rule of three so that you optimize your performances. Right? I hope that makes sense to you because that's how we are really kind of thinking, right? And that brings me towards the end. I told you towards the end, those of you stick around, you should be getting a bonus. So, assuming that you're still around, you're listening to me right now, here's the bonus. How do you improve the game for the big book? Some of you must be already knowing it. The answer is use AI, use ChatGPT. I think it's a very powerful tool. Those of you who have not started using it by now, well, I don't know why you have done that to yourself, but please get an account with ChatGPT or a Gemini or anything that kind of suits you. यू माइट रिमेंबर, मैंने शुरुआत में कहा था रीड वॉट एवर इज रेलिवेंट। सॉरी, मैंने शुरुआत में कहा था कि रीड वॉट एवर इज रेलिवेंट। हाउ व्हाट वेयर डू यू स्टार्ट फ्रॉम? यू स्टार्ट फ्रॉम वॉट एवर इज रेलिवेंट। समटाइम्स व्हेन यू ओपन अप अ चैप्टर यू माइट से यार पल्मोनरी थ्रोम्बोएम्बोलिज्म अभी तक सिखाया नहीं है, बट नेक्स्ट चैप्टर वही है, बाकी सब पढ़ लिया, इसको पढ़ना है, कैसे पढ़ूं? अब ना आपने क्वेस्ट में सुना है, ना आपने क्लास किसी और क्लास में सुना है, आप फर्स्ट टाइम एक टॉपिक को एनकाउंटर कर रहे हो, या शायद आपने कहीं सुना है बट आपको अब याद नहीं उसमें क्या बोला गया। ठीक है, go to a app like ChatGPT, go to a AI LLM like ChatGPT, and tell that ChatGPT before you start reading, create a summary of that topic. So let's say you're reading pleural effusion. Tell ChatGPT, hi, whatever, ChatGPT, I am a final year medical student or I am a third year medical student. I am going to read this from the chapter, this chapter from the textbook of Harrison's. Before I read that, I would like to know a summary of what are the relevant points about pleural effusion. Summarize them for me. Tak. You will have a summary in front of you. It is like, the ChatGPT is creating that same work that you are going to do any which case for you. Now, you don't need to mug it up. Please don't do that because that's going to kind of reduce your critical thinking skills, which you do when you filter it. But you get a summary out of it and it helps you to start reading the book much, 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 much faster. I do that now with almost everything that I read. Before I start reading a big new section of anything, and I keep on reading exploring new ideas of new books which are not of my field, not medical. I'm talking about so other fields also, but technical fields, technical things. I ensure that I get a summary before I start reading. You will find it very useful. Some of you, I'm sure, are already doing it. Those of you not doing it, please do that. Next, when you read a particular section and you feel यार ये चीज समझ नहीं आया क्या बोल रहा था हैरिसन, ठीक है, go back to ChatGPT and click a photo and put up that photograph on ChatGPT and tell it explain. Right now, if I'm not sure if this is available for the non-paid version, but paid version में तो ये है. You can send a photo and it can read the text and explain it to you. If not, type it down and say, this is what the textbook of Harrison says. Can you explain this to me in simple language? And if you don't understand what he's talking, ask it to elaborate. It will keep on elaborating. Clarify your difficult concepts. Get the information on the go. It's absolutely a game changer if you use ChatGPT like this. Once you have done that, then before you kind of prepare for your Viva, ask it to create. So let's say you're reading COPD. Ask it to create clinical scenarios, natural histories, and differentials of COPD. Right? It will tell you that patient came with this, patient came with that. Tell it. You can ask these are different questions also. Tell me what are the differentials that I should think of when I see a case of COPD. Tell me what are the natural history that I should think of. Now again, don't spend too much time here there. Use the Pomodoro. All of this can be done within 25 minutes or probably even 15 minutes if you decide to. If 15 minutes में मैं chat GPT से बात करके निकलूँ. And finally, for those of you who really care about MCQs right now, my thought is third year, final year में MCQ के बारे में मत सोचो. कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा आप आज एमसीक्यू करो या ना करो. एब्सोल्युटली कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा. एमसीक्यू का टाइम जब आएगा तब उसे करना. बट अगर आप करना ही चाहते हो आज या बाद में भी करना चाहते हो, आस्क ChatGPT to create MCQs for you. It can of course create MCQs. Ask it to administer a test to you after you have read. You can say, I have read COPD from Harrison's. Give me a test of 10 MCQs. Don't give me the answers right now. Test me on it and let me give the answers and test me and give me a feedback. It can create 10 questions for you. Try answering them, and that's it, right? But the first two ones, I think, are the real game changers. Asking for summaries before you start reading and asking for clarification of difficult areas can be a game changer when you're reading big books. Remember, one of the problem with big books has been languages. The language is a little complex. It takes time to evolve with that language. But if you start using ChatGPT or any AI, that can really help you become the masters, right? So with that, I think that's all that I wanted to talk to you about. I hope that makes sense to you. I hope most of you would be inspired to take up a big book and read it. It is not difficult if you plan it. If you plan it and if you're determined to do it, if you know why you want to do it, I think you will be successful. So that's all from me over here. I'm now going to look into what are the questions that have been put up in the WhatsApp group. So I'll read through the questions. I think there's going to be a lag between me talking to here live and the time that you're listening to it and putting up questions. So I'll take up the questions and I'll answer them as we go. If I don't get any questions in the next few minutes, then probably that's about it. So let's see if we have any questions. So I can see some of you are typing, so I'll just wait for that to happen. Of course, I would love to hear your feedback as well as to whether this made sense it or not like it. Is there something else that you want to know about reading a big book? Were you expecting something else? Were you expecting me to say something else which I did not say probably? I would of course love to hear that feedback. So I'm as of now waiting for your messages. I can see a couple of you have started typing, but let's see what messages I get. Okay, so first question that I'm getting is, sir, you once mentioned in the class that even you haven't read entire Harrison. Absolutely, I haven't read entire Harrison. Is there any preference order like must do topics or section from the book that we just target reading the entire book? So that's a very good question. Thank you so much for that question. So I don't think you should read the entire book, right? Thank you for the question. And here's a list that I'm going to dictate. Those of you interested, write it down. This again, I'm not prepared with the list right now, but this is what I can talk from my experience of what I believe are the most important topics that you should read from Harrison's if you plan to read Harrison's. So let's go topic wise. CVS may, now make a note of this. CVS may, I think heart failure is definitely something you should read. Mitral valve diseases are definitely something you should read. SC segment elevation MI is definitely something that you should read. Supraventricular tachycardia is definitely something you should read, right? This is what I feel is from cardiology. You see, I'm not asking all the topics, just these topics I feel must read from Harrison. इसके ऊपर जो भी पढ़ोगे bonus. बाकी टॉपिक्स कहाँ से पढ़ोगे? वेस्ट के नोट से पढ़ो, अरे दूसरे किताबों से पढ़ो. चार टॉपिक्स मैंने खाए कार्डियोलॉजी. In pulmonary medicine, again, I don't believe everything should be read. I think COPD, yes. Asthma, partly yes. A lot part of asthma will have to be excluded. We will have to filter a lot of asthma. Probably not everything in asthma. ILD, again, yes. I don't think anybody else writes ILD as well as Harrison does. In fact, it has a lot of MCQ sitting in it. But again, a lot of filtering is required when you're reading ILD and pleural effusion. These are the four things which I would say should be definitely read from Harrison's. Others are optional, right? Next comes nephrology. I think nephrology mein AKI, CKD. That's it. AKI, CKD, and diagrams in nephrology. I think they are really very well given in nephrology. Endocrinology, I think pituitary, very well given in Harrison's. Adrenal, very well given in Harrison's. Diabetes, definitely very well given in Harrison's, but very vast, so you'll have to do a lot of filtering work to read the entire diabetes from Harrison. So endocrinology mein ye thi, and of course, how can I forget calcium? Calcium metabolism, I think it's one of the best chapters written in Harrison, but it again is a very complex topic, so you'll have to do a lot of filtering work when you read it, right? Again, for these topics, I will say always wait for quest to happen. After quest has discussed it with you, then go and read it, or use ChatGPT summary, or use some other book and then go there, because these are complex topics, might not be very easy to read or filter the first time round. Next comes gastroenterology and hepatology. I absolutely believe that hepatology जितना crisp लिखा है हैरिसन ने वो कहीं नहीं, मतलब कोई और चैप्टर ऑफ हैरिसन उतना क्रिस्प नहीं. सो इफ यू आर समवन हु वांट्स टू ट्राई हैरिसन एंड वांट टू सी कि कैसा लगता है हेपेटोलॉजी की केसेस, तो असाइटिस तो वार्ड में होता ही है. एक असाइटिस का केस देख के आ जाओ और फिर शुरू करो लिवर सिरोसिस. सो हेपेटोलॉजी में लिवर सिरोसिस एब्सोल्युटली इट्स रियली वेल रिटन इन हैरिसन, नो डाउट. So one of the first chapter I would say you should read is liver cirrhosis if you're going to try reading Harrison's for the first time. So liver cirrhosis, alcoholic liver disease, ये दो चीजें. And in gastro वाला component, I would say inflammatory bowel disease and pancreatitis, ये दो चीजें, ये ही पढ़ने जैसा है. बाकी सब कहीं और से पढ़ो. I'm not saying the rest is bad. I'm just saying don't spend too much time doing that. You can use your short-term plan and finish off those topics from somewhere else. The next comes neurology. So neurology may again, not everything should be read from Harrison's. Stroke के diagrams. I'm not even saying the text. If you read the text, good. If you don't read the text many times, it's okay. एक बार पढ़ के छोड़ सकते हो. First reading करके वापस कभी नहीं गए, ऐसा भी कर सकते हो. थोड़े से points निकाल के कहीं लिख दिए, वो भी कर सकते हो. But diagrams of stroke, they are beautiful. Always read them. Always go through the diagrams very carefully. Second, epilepsy, quite well given. Parkinson's, quite well given. उसके बाद ना स्पाइनल कॉर्ड वगैरह मैं तो कहूंगा मत पढ़ो. आई वुड स्ट्रांगली रेकमेंड न्यूरोलॉजी क्वेस्ट के नोट से करो. बट देन कम्स माइस्थीनिया ग्रेविस, वेरी वेल डन. जीबीएस, गुइलेट सिंड्रोम, बहुत अच्छे से दिया गया है. इन्फ्लेमेटरी मायोपैथीज जो रूमेट में अब शिफ्ट हो गया है, पहले यहाँ न्यूरो में हुआ करता था, वो भी बहुत अच्छा चैप्टर. कुछ छोड़ तो नहीं दिया मैंने. Yeah, I think that's all that is in neurology, right? Again, you see, I'm not talking about all the topics here. A lot of it I'm just skipping and saying they're not really required that you read a Harrison's for it. Critical care medicine में ARDS बहुत अच्छा दिया हुआ है. Mechanical ventilation, if you have the kind of bandwidth for it, is again given very well over there. Shock is again given very well, but again you need the bandwidth for it, because ये कोई पूछेगा नहीं आपको इंटरेस्ट इसलिए आप पढ़ रहे हो, तो बहुत अच्छे चैप्टर्स. कौन से टॉपिक रह गया? कार्डियो हो गया, पल्मोनरी हो गया, गैस्ट्रो हो गया, न्यूरो हो गया, एंडोक्राइन हो गया, नेफ्रो हो गया, रूमेटोलॉजी, एसएलई. आई थिंक दैट्स इट. एसएलई. एंड जब आप एमसीक्यूज के लिए पढ़ोगे तो वैस्कुलाइटिस, बट अभी मत पढ़ो बिकॉज डजंट मेक एनी सेंस राइट नाउ. बट एमसीक्यू के लिए जब पढ़ोगे तो वैस्कुलाइटिस. इन्फेक्शियस डिसीजेस, I wouldn't recommend reading from Harrison's. Infectious diseases के लिए I would say go to API. Or some other, maybe Dr. Budu's book might be good. I have not seen that book. So, but API, yeah, for Dr. Budu's book, because that's an Indian author. I have not read the book. Should be for infectious diseases, not Harrison's. Don't read Harrison's for infectious diseases. We see a very different spectrum in India. The second question I am taking is, should we start with one big book at a time or more simultaneously? I think more. I don't think you should be sticking to one big book. If your plan is to read other big books as well, they all should be in that 40% long-term plan. That's how you keep it going. Otherwise, थक जाओगे एक book पढ़ के. But again, if your plan is to read only one big book, तो फिर that's up to you. I think a similar question is how should I plan for Bailey and Harrison's? I mean, can I start Bailey in final year and Harrison's now? I don't think so. I think you should start both of them simultaneously. Both of them become a part of your 40%, जो आपका long term plan है. And within them you can divide कि भाई बेली जल्दी हो सकता है, हैरिसन को टाइम लगेगा, तो मे बी बेली को मैंने 20% टाइम दिया, दूसरे बिग बुक्स को 20% टाइम दिया और 60% ऑफ दैट 40% मैंने हैरिसन को दिया. ऐसा आप कर सकते हैं. बट आई वुडंट से वेट फॉर next year to start building. What is better, chapter wise or relevant information based on observation posting or what the professor has asked during rounds? It is very usually very haphazard and not specific. That's a good question. And I think what I said is what I would stay with. I don't agree with reading Harrison chapter to chapter. पूरा cardiology मैंने पढ़ लिया. I don't think it's a good idea. I think it is better that you read whatever is relevant for you at that time. उससे आपका स्पीड बना रहेगा. जब आपका फर्स्ट रीडिंग खत्म होने आएगा, यू रियलाइज अरे ये सब चैप्टर्स में पढ़ चुका हूँ, ठीक है, ये बच गए, तो उनके लिए अलग से एक पोमोडोरो बनाओ कि इतने टाइम में मैं खत्म करूंगा इसको. दैट्स ओके. बट टू पिक अप स्पीड यू नीड टू हैव इंटरेस्ट इन इट, नो, और वो रेलेवेंस होना चाहिए. सो डोंट स्टार्ट सेइंग मैं पूरा पल्मोनरी पढ़ूंगा या पूरा नेफ्रो पढ़ूंगा या पूरा गैस्ट्रो पढ़ूंगा. दैट इज वेयर यू बर्न आउट. Your biggest enemy is going to be burning out. Don't burn out. Keep yourself enthusiastic, keep yourself alert, keep yourself on the go. Don't burn out. बोर हो गया ना, छोड़ दो, वापस आएंगे कि वापस कभी करें. कौन सा लाइफ खत्म हो रही है, कौन सा मुझे ये आज ही खत्म करना है, ठीक है. सो थिंक लॉन्ग टर्म. When you start thinking long term, you stop getting burnt out because you don't want to finish everything right now. You say, I will read what is relevant. I will get maximum out of what I do. What I do, I'll do fantastic. जो मैंने नहीं किया नहीं किया भाई, कभी किसी दिन कर लेंगे. बट मेरे पास शॉर्ट टर्म भी तो है, वो मेरा बैकअप है. तो अगर मैंने आज इसको लॉन्ग टर्म वाले प्लान में से नहीं पढ़ा, बट मुझे लगता है यार ये तो एग्जाम में आ सकता है, मेरे पास बैकअप है ना, कि मैंने एग्जाम आ गई बीच में से कोई जिसमें पल्मोनरी पूछने वाला है, मैंने तो सिर्फ सीओपीडी और आस्थमा पढ़ रखा है, बाकी तो पढ़ा ही नहीं है. मुश्किल शॉर्ट टर्म किताब है ना, मैंने डेविडसन में पढ़ लिया, मैंने बुलूर में पढ़ लिया, फटाफट नोट्स देख लिए क्वेश्चन के जो भी है. सो यू नीड टू बी स्मार्ट इन यूजिंग बोथ. बट कंसेप्ट बिल्डिंग हैपजार्ड नहीं है. कंसेप्ट बिल्डिंग रेलेवेंट है कि आपको उस समय वो सवाल था आपके मन में, किसी ने पूछा था इसलिए था, या आपने कुछ सुन लिया था इसलिए था, तो आपने उस समय वो पढ़ा वहां से. The next one is, I think, a comment and a question. The comment is, yes, sir, picking up two big books would be doable if I were in third year. Now I'm in final year MBBS. I don't have the luxury of time. Should I set boundaries for every subject so I am able to do two readings? Absolutely. So, as I said, if you are in final year and listening to me right now about how do you read this, then I would say the timeline will have to be kind of squeezed in. You will probably have to do away with the third reading story. You will have to make your first reading itself much more crisp and probably start drawing notes at that time itself. And the second reading should have you adding on to the notes and then it's the revision. So in the final year, probably you'll have to do that. And taking up two big books, well, there's no option. I mean, it's for you to decide. Do you want to read books? Do you want to read the second big book or not? But I'm going to tell you this also, that if you have already read in third year, if you're in a final year student and if you have read Harrison's in third year, please don't give away that benefit. Don't say कि अब मेरे पास time नहीं है. Plan the second reading, plan the third reading. Remember, you don't need to read everything from Harrison's. You don't need to say मेरा पूरा exam Harrison से based है. नहीं. But जो important बड़े concepts है, जो big diseases है, वो मुझे हैरिसन में क्या लिखा था, मैंने पता किया था, मुझे मालूम था क्या लिखा है. भले उसका मुझे आज फायदा ना हो, you will see when you grow as in your career, when you give the PG entrance exams, when you become a resident, when you become a consultant, these ideas of how to read a big book and how to filter information is how you will start thinking. When the patient talks to you, you'll start filtering and bringing it to those points which you want to get out of it. It will make you much, much, much smarter. Right? I hope I've answered that question. Should we read pathophysiology from Robbins or Harrison's only? Absolutely do not do this, right? So do not read two big books for the same topic simultaneously. आप सर्जरी पढ़ रहे हो और आप मेडिसिन पढ़ रहे हो, या मेडिसिन पढ़ रहे हो और आप पीडियाट्रिक्स का बड़ा बुक पढ़ रहे हो, ये ठीक है. बट आप सार्कोइडोसिस पढ़ने के लिए क्लिनिकल फीचर्स एक जगह से पढ़ रहे हो और पैथोफिजियोलॉजी के लिए और एक बड़ा किताब खोल रहे हो, दैट विल बी एब्सोल्युटली you going into too much details. I've already cautioned you against this idea. Going into too much details is the reason why most students will not be able to make the best out of these books. You are reading like a newspaper. Why do you want to go into reading it like you are doing a critical appraisal of a journal, right? You're not doing that. So do not read big books for the same topic. जो हैरिसन में लिखा है, रॉबिन से अच्छा ही लिखा है. आई एम नॉट सेइंग दिस बिकॉज आई एम अ फैन ऑफ द बुक. आई एम अ फैन ऑफ द बुक. और बिकॉज आई एम मेडिसिन गाय. आई एम अ मेडिसिन गाय. बट आई एम टेलिंग यू बिकॉज दैट इज द ट्रूथ. रॉबिन्स इज अ फैंटास्टिक बुक. आई लव रॉबिन्स. बट हैरिसंस का तोड़ नहीं है. हैरिसंस का एडिटिंग इज न्यू लेवल, राइट? तो stick to Harrison's if you're reading Harrison's. I don't think you miss out on anything. And if there is something that doesn't match with what has been given in Robbins, without a doubt, believe in Harrison's. Period. Right? So I think I've answered all the questions that I've got by now. One more question is, do I read the physical book or PDF? I don't think it matters. It depends on your style of reading. I have read both. I have read physical book in the past. Now I read PDF. It's up to you. Time badalta hai, technology badalti hai. Book is a technology. The written stuff is the real juice of it. So you go for whatever suits you, right? A lot of our professors asked us to read cardinal manifestations, but once we start reading, it gets slightly tough since there are huge tables of causes and haphazard essays for approach. How should we read that? I think that's a good question again. Hmm, जो पहला पहला सेक्शन है हैरिसंस का जिसमें सारे सिम्टम्स लिखे हैं, मुझे पर्सनली लगता है दैट शुड बी रेड आफ्टर यू हैव रेड द सब्जेक्ट. मतलब, see, the book has been written in a certain fashion, but the advantage of book is that you don't need to read it in the same fashion. You can always finish cardiology and then go back and read dyspnea or palpitations. You can finish cardio and pulmonary and then read the cardiopulmonary symptoms. You can finish reading some sections of neurology and then go back and read approach to hemiplegia. That ways you see. I am repeating what I've said. The book has not been written for undergraduates. The book has been written to talk about everything about that subject. People who are writing it are not writing it with you in their mind, unlike the Indian authors, right? They are not writing it to sell it to you. They are writing it because that's what has to be known about that particular topic. So it has been written for people who are already knowledgeable about the subject and they are going to come and read it. So they will find something new out of it. अब प्रॉब्लम ये है कि इफ यू आर नॉट नॉलेजेबल अबाउट द सब्जेक्ट, इफ यू हैव नॉट मच नॉलेज अबाउट अफेजिया क्या होता है और क्या होता है, तो अफेजिया के टाइप्स का क्या करोगे? अगर आपने डिस्निया फर्स्ट टाइम सुन रहे हो, आपने सुना ही नहीं कि कौन से पेशेंट डिस्निया लेके आते हैं, तो उसके कॉजेस की टेबल का क्या करोगे? So you need to have a background knowledge to go to those first few topics of Harrison's, which I know are fantastic. They are really good. But आपने सुना तो मैंने लिस्ट में उनके नाम ही नहीं लिए थे. Because I feel they are add-on to the systemic topics. Systemic topics सही से पढ़ो. And again, I am saying this again and again कि Quest में you are getting the best of it. वो blend करके मैं आपको दे रहा हूँ. तो you are already getting that information. And then you go back to those cardinal topics. And again, the same rule applies. Screen it, figure out what questions you are trying to read out of this particular chapter, then read, recite, revise or rather review, right? इस पैटर्न में जाओ, पोमोडोरो यूज करो, तब वो बैठेगा विद इन योर टाइम फ्रेम कि मुझे इतना ही इसमें से निकालना, वरना तो ओशन है. तो डोंट लेट दैट हैपन. What if I already have Chris notes of Robbins? Can we refer to pathophysiology from my notes with Harrison's as it might help? So that's a good question, but I would say that should come here. So if let's say you have already good notes written from Robbins, that fits in over here. You remember here I said there are going to be 2 or 3 sources. So अपने first reading of Harrison's में 1 paragraph is equal to 1 point किया. आपके सेकेंड रीडिंग में आपने नोट्स लिखना शुरू किया और मैंने कहा था नोट्स में ना 2-3 सोर्सेज होने चाहिए. सो इफ यू हैव गुड नोट्स ऑफ रॉबिन्स, वो यहां आएगा. दिस गोज इनटू योर दिस पर्टिकुलर नोट, राइट? आई होप यू आर गेटिंग द आंसर. दैट आई एम नॉट बाईपासिंग हैरिसन फॉर एनीथिंग. मेरा रीजन फॉर रीडिंग हैरिसन ही ये है कि ये भाई ये सबसे बढ़िया किताब, तो मैं क्यों उसके साथ किसी और के नोट्स पहले पढ़ूं? नहीं, मैं हैरिसन को हैरिसन के मेरिट के लिए पढ़ रहा हूँ बिकॉज हैरिसन तगड़ी किताब है. मैं उसको पढ़ूंगा, उसको समझूंगा, उसको स्क्रीन करूंगा. मेरे बेसलाइन नॉलेज से मुझे हेल्प होगा कि मैं स्क्रीन करते हुए और अच्छा फिल्टर करूंगा उस इन्फॉर्मेशन को, उसमें से और रेलेवेंट पॉइंट्स निकालूंगा. बट देन व्हेन आई मेक माय नोट, वेल इफ यू फील यू थिंक कि आपको वो रॉबिन्स के नोट्स को भी इसमें डालना है, बी माय गेस्ट, डालो. but not when you're doing the first reading, not when you're screening Harrison's. It should not substitute you reading Harrison's. It should substitute or add up in your notes. Right? I hope you get that answer. One of the question I'm getting, it's a direct message. I would encourage most of you to not put up a direct message, but this person has already asked other questions. I like the question, and the question is, why should we read Harrison's, and as in what is actually the output? The output is the same. I think it's a very fundamental question that the person is asking. The output is the same as why did you join Quest? I don't know why you joined Quest, right? For most of you, your seniors told you to join Quest, but by now you must have realized there is something in it for you, right? And that something is not for the short term. I am not planning to teach you for short term because I don't think कल आप पास हो जाओगे उसके बाद पढ़ाई खत्म करके कुछ और करोगे नहीं. आप पास होने के बाद इंटर्न बनोगे, इंटर्न के बाद रेसिडेंट बनोगे, रेसिडेंट के बाद कंसल्टेंट बनोगे और कंसल्टेंट बन के मेरे साथ आके प्रैक्टिस करोगे. ठीक है. Some of you might join me somewhere, some of you would be my co-colleagues, and I would want to have fantastic colleagues in you, right? And I'm really looking forward that tomorrow you become amazing consultants. You become amazing doctors who understand everything that's happening to your patient. You are not superficial in your knowledge. You are not half baked कि मैंने कुछ रट्टे मारे थे 10 चीजें वही करने हैं. I mean, it is so such a shameful thing when we see patients who are not being treated properly, and you know the reason is भाई जो ट्रीट कर रहा है उसको आ नहीं रहा है. ठीक है. ये एवरीडे प्रॉब्लम है भाई मेरे लिए. I don't want that problem. I don't like that when I see subpar performances, right? एग्जाम में आप जो भी करो रियल लाइफ में एक्सपोज कर देगी. तो why read Harrison? Because तुम लंबा गेम खेल रहे हो. If you're not playing the long game, Harrison is not for you. What will keep you motivated? Your ideas about what is the long game that you're playing. Are you playing for the next 20 years, 15 years, 50 years? Is that what you're playing for? Yeah, are you made up of that? No, I can't, I don't know. I don't think I can define that for you. It's for you to decide. Are you made up of that? Are you क्या ऐसे चीज के बने हुए हो जो लंबा रेस खेलेगा? लंबे रेस के घोड़े हो कि नहीं हो वो तुम्हें पता. मैं तो हूँ. I know that. I mean, what I'm talking with you right now is not something that I'm doing for the first time today. I have done it for many years now because I intend to do it. Okay? I intend to do this. And what do I get? What keeps me motivated doing this? मुझे क्या ही मिलेगा आपको हैरिसन कैसे पढ़ना है बता के. ठीक है. I mean, I'm always anyways teaching you what I need to teach you for medicine, right? Why do this? The same question is what you're asking. Why do this? Because I'm playing a long game. I want to give something which makes a difference to my life and to your lives as well, because that is my purpose. What is your purpose? I don't know. You find yours, right? And if it doesn't fit your purpose, there's no hard and fast rule कि आपको Harrison पढ़ना ही चाहिए था, right? I'm going to say this probably as a concluding remark. I think I've got all the questions that were asked. ऐसा बिल्कुल नहीं है कि आप हैरिसन नहीं पढ़ोगे तो आप सही नहीं बनोगे, बट ऐसा जरूर है कि आप हैरिसन पढ़ोगे तो कुछ चीज बनोगे. ठीक है. तो अब और भी तरीके होंगे सही बनने के. और मुझे जो मेरे एक सीनियर ने एक बार कहा था वो बात याद आती है हमेशा. यू कैनॉट बी सिलेक्टिवली सिंसियर. आई रिपीट, यू कैनॉट बी सिलेक्टिवली सिंसियर. या तो आप सिंसियर हो या आप सिंसियर नहीं. मुझे इस पूरे सेमिनार का एक अगर एंड पॉइंट पूछो तो मैं कहूंगा जो लोग सिंसियरली हैरिसन पढ़ना चाहते हैं और नहीं पढ़ पा रहे बिकॉज टेक्निक नहीं समझ आ रही, ये सेमिनार उनके लिए. बट आपको हैरिसन पढ़ना चाहिए कि नहीं, ये सेमिनार उसके लिए नहीं. आपको हैरिसन पढ़ना है कि नहीं ये आपको डिसाइड करना है. आप उतने सिंसियर हो कि नहीं. एंड आई डोंट मीन इनसिंसियर इफ यू आर नॉट सिंसियर इन डूइंग दिस, बट आई एम सेइंग व्हाट आई सेड अगेन. You cannot be selectively sincere. Either you're going to be sincere through and through, doing everything with absolute sincerity and not burning out because you plan with sincerity not to burn out, right? Then sky is the limit. ठीक है. फिर तो बहुत कुछ देने वाला है ये फील्ड आपको. आई होप दैट मेक्स सेंस. And with that, I would like to close down this session. I hope it made a lot of sense to those of you listening. You got a significant amount of information that is usable and a good food for thought. With that, thank you so much. Goodbye and Jai Hind.